The first signs of a loosening of the lockdown restrictions were visible today as the over 70s ventured outdoors for the first time in several weeks. Further easing will happen soon, with an announcement on the exit strategy now imminent. In preparation for this, details have emerged of how most people will be set free from lockdown while others remain in self-isolation. The concept is to try and identify where the virus might be present, for which testing, or screening as it will now be referred to, will become more aggressive. Going forward, there will be a systematic screening of frontline workers, such as people who work at entry points and other key locations, like Borders and Coast Guard and Customs officers, security guards and others. 1 in 7 of them will be tested every week, meaning that all will be tested every 7 weeks and will need to self-isolate until their result comes back or have recovered after testing positive. There will also be targeted screening of those who are in close contact with vulnerable people, such as the elderly. These include employees of the GHA, the care agency, elderly residential services, and private care firms such as Medoc and other. In these cases, tests will be every 4 weeks. Screening will rely on employees putting themselves forward voluntarily, but could be made compulsory.
My fear is that the people who do not want to get swabbed may be the very super spreaders we need to capture. So I wish that to persuade you that you have a civic duty when you are asked and nominated to be swabbed, because you're actually protecting your neighbours, your family, your friends when you go for swabbing. I'm sure if it was required to, there could be other ways of legislating for it. But I think the general principle is if we can avoid that and we can maintain our freedoms, this is what makes our society what it is. I'd rather do it that way.
The increased screening will be in tandem with enhanced contact tracing. From now on, everyone who tests positive will be subjected to a lengthy interview to determine who they have been in contact with. Those who are determined to be high risk will need to self-isolate. A contact tracing bureau is being set up to carry out the complex task. It's a more aggressive method in seeking and destroying the virus, which could result in a substantial number of people being on lockdown at some point. This is described as freedom of the many and seclusion of the few. For businesses, companies will now need to appoint a COVID-19 representative who will ensure compliance with social distancing measures, that there is adequate provision of sanitizer, and that all appropriate measures have been implemented in the firm. The representative will also provide data to the authorities on who is in isolation and why. New measures for companies are also being considered. These include beat-style payments for employees in sectors currently not covered by the regulations, such as law firms. These payments will be self-funded by the relevant firm. Business loans to assist with cash flow are also being arranged and modelled on the Channel Islands. These will be 80% guaranteed by the government and 20% by a bank. Changes are also being made to the insolvency regulations to provide a chance of survival for companies in difficulty as a result of the pandemic. But traders will need to adapt to the much-touted new normal.
Well, I think if anybody in business today thinks that they're going to be able to make the same profits this year as they did last year, they're in for a big surprise. I think the new normal means change. So businesses are going to have to learn to work in the new normal, which is going to be very different to where they were last year. I wish it were different, but we're not dealing with wishes, we're dealing with reality. And so the measures that we will be announcing to ease the lockdown will be gradual and slow. And as we see that transpiring, we will also then begin to look at what measures we can give as a safety net to businesses in order to help them forward. You will have seen that British Airways yesterday announced 12,000 redundancies. This is a very, very successful business, which is making almost 30% or more than 30% of its entire workforce redundant. The new normal is going to be different. And I think anybody that thinks otherwise and is going to expect government handouts to make the old normal come back, that's just not going to happen.
With there being no change in the number of cases locally, the easing of the restrictions is coming to the fore. But don't start celebrating just yet. The rules for a return to lockdown are already being drafted, including the triggers that would see the return of restrictions. Despite the positive news, Gibraltar is not out of the crisis by any stretch of the imagination.